Hi, welcome to Nature Sketch Creates California Poppy Step-by-Step Painting Instructions video. In this video, I'll be showing you how to use Nature Sketch Creates step-by-step instructions to paint California Poppy. First, collect all your materials and make sure they're ready. Remember, this is just a sketch. Relax, have fun, and don't worry too much if you think you made a mistake. Let's get started. Step 1. You will want to transfer this image to the watercolor paper. So use a little bit of the tape over the top of the transfer image, fold it over to the back of the watercolor paper. Make sure not to cover any of the transfer lines, image lines, with the tape. Then you take your graphite transfer paper and you'll want it this dark side down and the light side up. Place that on top of the watercolor paper, fold it down, and then you're ready to get started. So now that you have the graphite transfer paper and the tape in place, go ahead and trace over all the lines. I like to start from left to right. You'll want to use a medium pressure. And don't worry too much about any mistakes or getting the lines exact. Just trace over all those lines. And once you have a few lines, go ahead and check to make sure that those lines are actually transferring, that you have it all set up right. If you have the white side down, the lines will not transfer. So you can see the lines are transferring well. They're at kind of a medium level of darkness, so you can just keep on going. Make sure to put on some music and relax and just take your time. You don't have to do this in one sitting. You can come back to this at any time in order to finish it. The graphite transfer paper and the image, they're not going to change anything if you leave it and come back. Go ahead and check that all the flower lines are transferred. I'm missing just a little bit right here. And that you can double check by just flipping this up and down. It doesn't matter where the graphite paper is, and the tape is keeping the image transfer where it's supposed to be. Some of these lines didn't quite transfer right. A few of these little lines in here. There we go. Just kind of, I usually just flip it up and down. Helps me see if I'm missing anything. At this point, you can go ahead and transfer the common name and the scientific name and the hole punches if you want. I'm going to leave the hole punches off. I can always add those later. You can reline this up pretty easily for those. So I'm just going to go ahead and add this common name and a scientific name. And this part is optional as well. You do not have to do it. And I find the easiest way to do it is to just kind of draw the outline of these letters. I'm going to be filling in with ink later through ink pens. Let's go ahead and check that all the lines are transferred. Looks good. You want to double check the flower image one more time, that all the poppy parts are transferred. Looks pretty good. And once you're ready, go ahead and remove the transfer paper, and you can remove the tape. I would remove the back part first there. Set that aside. Go ahead and take your tape off and save it to the side. I like to reuse it, so I'll put it back on my stick here to reuse it. And this image will be used to protect your image later while you're painting, so make sure to keep that as well. And now you are ready to move on to step 2. Step 2, paint in the wettest, lightest layer of poppy blue green. So first you'll want to mix the poppy blue green, and it's 4 drops of 25H Hansa yellow medium. Make sure that is mixed up. Sometimes it settles on the bottom. One, 2, 3, 4. And you can see how it settled a little bit on the side as well. So it's always good to make sure it's well mixed. And then 1 drop of the 22H Payne's Gray. 22H Payne's Gray. Make sure that's mixed. These colors are very vibrant. The level can go a long way. Go ahead and mix that up. Add a little bit of water by adding some pressure to this part of your paintbrush. If you have a regular brush, then you want to add a little bit of water from your cup. And then dab it off onto your towel. And for this, we'll want to use, in step 2, the lightest blue-green A. And that's going to be the wettest color. So as you can see right now, you need to put it on your test strip. It's pretty dark because it's pretty dry. And that is color B, as you can see here. And you add more water. You take a little bit to the side, and you can add more water by putting some pressure on your paintbrush or adding it from your cup. And you'll have to add a lot because it's really, really, really concentrated and vibrant. And hopefully you have plenty of space on your palette to mix. And then dab it just a little bit and then test it out, and you can see that's gotten a lot wetter, or a lot lighter and wetter. And that looks pretty close. I want to start even lighter than that, because with watercolor you always want to err on the wetter side or the lighter color, because you can always work up to a darker one, but it's very hard to move backwards. So I'm going to add even more. More water to that. And try it again here. That looks a lot better. I just need to add a lot of water. I'm going to take that color, take some of that color, dab it off, and start painting. So I'll use this transfer image to protect my painting as I move along, and since I'm right-handed, I'm going to start on the left side. That way my hand doesn't smudge the paint. And I start on the top. It's still not quite as wet as I would like. And kind of move that paint through all these green areas from this flower bud down into the stem and the leaves. There's a little bud here sticking out, stem. And if you get out of the lines at all, don't worry too much. You can redefine those a little bit later. If you get a little bit of water outside, no big deal, just wipe it off. Paint could be a stylized look. If you take drips of paint, you can even add some to the outside if you really want to. And I'm going to use a little bit more water. Pull that paint back up here for a little darker. And you see I've gotten outside the lines. Again, no big deal. Just redefine those again later with our ink lines at the end with our micron pens. And just getting all this leaves filled in. And then continue that with the other parts of the image. As you can see, you can refer to step 2. It's pulling all the paint through. And now you're done with step 2, and you can move on to step 3. Step 3, paint the wettest, lightest layer of poppy orange and reddish pink. You do not have to wait for the green layer to dry, but it might be helpful just to prevent smudges before moving on to this next step here. First thing, of course, you want to mix your paint up, and you have 1 drop of 15 permanent red. Again, make sure they're mixed together. Take 1 drop. I'm going to go ahead and move my palette. Pulling a little bit of paint and 1 drop. And then 7 drops of 13 Hansa Deep Yellow. Sure that's well mixed. Another thing I do in between steps is I fill up my water brush. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Go ahead and mix those up. A little bit of water. And that's very concentrated. Might need my little test strip here. And pull a little to the side. I'm going to mix 1 more color, so I'm going to want to leave some space here for that. Get it pretty wet because we're going to need to use a very wet light layer of this color. Dab off a lot of the paint on to your water brush. Take some of that paint out and grab a little bit and test it out on your strip. Looks pretty good. Move this out of the way. So I picked up some paint and then I dabbed it off on my towel to make sure it's not too concentrated. My cap to the side and make sure my painting is protected. Now if you left these spots and they're still a little damp, just make sure you're really careful not to cover them with your paper to smudge them. But mine are dry. They dry pretty fast. Again, I'm going to start left to right since I'm right-handed with the petals in this first flower. And I'm just going to fill it in, kind of like I'm coloring. Just kind of filling in that entire space with 1 nice consistent layer of paint. And again, if you get outside the lines, not a big deal. Don't worry too much about any little mistakes you make. They're going to add some character to your painting. So just go ahead and fill in, just like in the reference image, in step 3, all of the poppy orange. Okay. So I have the first part of step 3 done. Then I will want to go ahead and mix the color for the second part of step 3. So we'll mix the poppy reddish pink. Take the 33 raw umber, make sure to shake it up. Take 1 drop, keep it farther away from my other color, and then 3 drops of the 15H permanent red. Shake that up. One, 2, 3. And add some water to mix it. And we're going to use a very wet, light layer of this color, this reddish, poppy reddish pink. So we'll add a bunch of water here. Take some of the paint out of the brush, maybe add a little bit more water, and again, test it on your test strip first. And I think that looks pretty close to the color, but maybe a little bit lighter. Really light. Really light, really wet. And some of the paint out. Dab it in there, some of the paint out, and carefully, a little bit of water around my brush, carefully paint in those receptacles. If any parts are still wet, just be careful not to touch them. So this right here, here, and as you can see, I'm working left to right again to prevent smudges. Get a little bit more paint, dab it off. These areas here. And then there. And I left this area blank, so I'm going to go ahead and fill that in. I'm going to grab a little bit more of this after I cleaned out my brush on my towel first, and then I'm going to grab a little bit more of the really light A color, the poppy blue-green, and I'm going to go ahead and add that in there. And I should have went ahead and painted in these stamen here, so I'm going to add a little bit more of that poppy orange to my brush, the C, the very wet, very light one, and just kind of fill those in. It's always okay to make some mistakes because this is a very forgiving method, and you can come back and fix it like I did, or even fix it later. Now that you have the poppy reddish pink and the first layer of the poppy orange, you can go ahead and move on to step 4. Once the painting is dry, you can move on to step 4, paint in the shading using a drier, darker poppy orange. And as you can see, my painting is dry. So you want to use a darker D, and D is the poppy orange, the drier, darker, so you already mixed. So you can take that color And you'll want to add shading based on your final reference image. So make sure you have that on hand and based on step 4 and the step-by-step instructions. So also refer to that for placement. And again, I'm going to start left to right and add some color there. It's starting a little dark, which is fine. I'm just going to remix, add a little bit more water, and go a little bit lighter. And basically, I'm going to go around the edges and the lines. To add definition and form to this flower. And you can see all of that better in your final reference image because it's a lot larger than your step-by-steps. And one nice layer, and then move on to the other flowers. So this big middle flower again, probably start with all the edges. And if it's a little dark, just go back, add some more water. You can always test it on your test strip. I have lots more space on the other side if I want. And using my paper to keep my hand from making mistakes by smudging. Now that you have all of those done, you can let it dry and move on to step 5. Now we're on step 5, and we're going to use all of the colors to finalize the form by adding shade throughout. So we're going to use B, D, and F. So B, again, is the dryer of the poppy blue green. D is the dryer of the poppy orange. And F is the dryer of the poppy reddish pink. So go ahead and get a little bit of a medium B. Test it out on your strip first. I think that looks pretty good. Add a little bit more water. And then going to add that to the edges. I'm going to refer to my final reference image, kind of try to bring it to that same level here of shading, definition, in order to define the form. So get to the top of the flower bud. We're going to bring that pink down. And then some lines up, going up. Moving into the stem, just basically outlining it with the paint will give it some definition and form. Again, with the leaves, same thing. You can just go ahead and do all of the same throughout, just outlining all of these parts. And as long as your color, you might want to get some more. It's not too diluted. See, I got out of line, so that will be redefined there. And bring this paint into the image. And as long as you're close, like the outlines and a few other areas, it's going to bring a lot of definition. And you can just continue to do this. Moving from left to right. And a couple more washes in there, some light washes in it. I liked a little darker, and I like where it's at. As you can see, it's pretty messy. We're going to go ahead and define the outer parts of the image later. So I like the level of the green, poppy blue-green color, B. And I'll go ahead and add some of the D, the poppy orange. So go ahead and clean off my paintbrush by adding some water onto my towel, and add some more water to the poppy orange, and test to make sure it's not too dark onto my test strip before applying it. And I actually think that's a little light. Get a little bit more, pull it in there, and test it one more time, and I like that. Set that aside and add it to the petals. And if your blue-green layer is still wet, just be careful where you put in your hands or your transfer image. Again, adding it to places based on the reference image. You can just go ahead throughout and add that to your image, picking up more paint as needed from your palette and making sure to dab it on your paper towel or your cloth towel. So I like the level of D, the poppy orange. You can go ahead and add more layers as it dries. Make sure to let it dry in between to bring it to whatever level of shading you feel works best for your painting. This is your painting. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to F, the red, poppy reddish pink. Just going to go on the receptacles to give them a little more form. And I don't need a very dark color. I'm just going to be careful not to put my hand down. If it's a little too dark, just feel free to dab it off. Get paint as needed. You'll dab it off onto your towel, of course. Adding it to all the edges. And I think that all looks good to me. So I'm going to move on to step 6. Step 6, adding the ink lines, starting with the 005 micron. And this is black. So I'm going to start again from the left and move to the right with the flower bud here. And in my image, I made this a little thicker than this outline. So I'm going to redefine those lines. And you want to use about a medium pressure. And really, you're going to redraw all these lines. So it's easier if you look at your reference image here, your final reference image. And you will see some of those lines still from when you transferred. So what you're doing is really redrawing all of them again with different pens, so different thickness. And you're not redrawing them exactly, you're going to redraw them based on where your paint went. So my paint made this a little thicker, so I'm going to make that thicker. Things in nature are inconsistent, so it can be a little bit loose. There are some hard set rules, but for the most part, you can get away with thickness or slight changes in shape. And this is a sketch, so you can really get away with a lot. It's not meant to be perfect. It's just meant to get the idea of the plant. It's quite pretty, I think, and loose and fun. So just go through and add all those lines. Now we will move on to using the 0.1 micron to add some thicker lines, as seen in the image in step 6 and in the final reference image. These just define the shape a little bit more, giving it a little more form. So usually light would be coming in on the left side, you see from the top and the left. So these are lighter edges, these are darker. So there'll be thicker lines where the light's not hitting in the shadows. But if that's confusing, just follow along in this picture and just kind of add them. And I like where that's at. Next, you want to use the same 0.1 micron to write in the common name here, California poppy, and then also the scientific name. We start again by outlining and then kind of filling it in. So trace that outline that I created before and then just kind of fill it in. And just go ahead and at this point you can stop, or you can add more paint on top of this. Just make sure to work very light. It's hard to go backwards. You can always go forwards with the paint. So when I say light, I mean wet. And between layers, just wait for it to dry. These pens are waterproof. If you're using a different pen, you might not want to do that. You can also add more ink lines at any time to make this the way you'd like it to look. It's your painting, so you get to do whatever you want to do with it. We're done. Great job. You've created a painting that is unique to you. Thank you for joining me. I hope you had fun and had a chance to relax a little. You have a few options of what to do with this now that you're done. You can punch holes in your painting using the provided guidelines on the transfer image and add it to your sketchbook. You can gift it to a friend. You can frame it, but make sure to also add it to our Facebook fan art page. We'd love to see it. Don't forget to check out the Nature Sketch Crate website for future lessons, crates, and art supplies. Also, make sure to sign up for our newsletter for updates at naturesketchcrate.com.